Hey, you know it, I know it, we got a problem in this world. It's too many rich dicks. But with your help, we're trying to do something about it here at MMN. It's time for this week's Rich Dicks segment. And of course, it wouldn't be complete without a nomination from Rona for every single landlord. Thank you, Rona. Also got a nomination for Ticketmaster for squeezing customers and artists with high fees. Even the company admitted its fees are getting out of control and promised a $10 refund to people who recently bought seats for an upcoming concert featuring The Cure. People were pissed when they bought cheap tickets only to see the price more than double due to Ticketmaster's abusive fees. Got a couple nominations for J.K. Rowling, who continues to embrace transphobia and is now claiming that her fans actually have been thanking her for it. Why this lady won't just enjoy her billions in the castle she lives in is beyond me. She's committed to the cruelty. Strong contender this week. And finally, a nomination here for all the goddamn CEOs, especially the ones involved in the Silicon Valley bank meltdown, who might have participated in some insider trading as the firm was going under. DOJ and SEC are investigating it. Very good nominations all around, as usual. Thank you, everybody. But this week's Rich Dick is
No way.
Boeing.
No way. Motherfuck.
Thanks to Old Man 1980 on Twitter for the nod. The airliner is responsible for the deaths of 346 people in 2 plane crashes in 2018 and 2019, and now it's nickel and diming victims' families who sued for damages. I'll get to that in just a second. But first, a quick recap of how we got here. Both crashes were caused by an automatic maneuvering system that had been installed on the new 737 MAX planes called MCAS. Engineers at Boeing informed their bosses of potential safety issues with the system, but they were ignored so that the company could deliver the planes without any delay. The problems with MCAS were withheld from regulators, flight manuals, and even the pilots themselves. Airliners don't like to have to pay for extra training for pilots on new planes, so Boeing had made a deal that if regulators required pilots to have extra training on the 737 MAX, then it would give those airliners a hefty $1 million rebate on each plane purchased. And that was all the motivation Boeing needed to withhold information about MCAS to avoid that training requirement. And so the planes were sold, and then 2 of them crashed. One in Ethiopia, one in Indonesia, killing everyone on board. Now, no executives at Boeing were thrown in jail for misleading regulators and customers, but the company has been forced to pay up since. It's put up $100 million toward a victims fund. It settled charges with the SEC over making misleading statements to investors for $200 million, and it agreed to pay $2.5 billion to settle charges with the Department of Justice. It's also settled hundreds of civil suits with victims' families. And then there's the billions in costs associated with grounding the 737 MAX plane for nearly 2 years following the crashes. Boeing, of course, is not paying the entirety of these costs. It had insurance to cover some of the losses. But Boeing finds itself receiving the rich dick dishonors this week because of how it's behaving in the remaining civil lawsuits brought by crash victims' families. The company is in court right now trying to limit the damages that can be awarded to plaintiffs by arguing that the victims of the crash did not experience pain and suffering. From the Wall Street Journal, quote, Boeing attorneys cited an expert who said that the 737 MAX victims died painlessly because the airplane crashed into the ground so fast that their brains didn't have time to process pain signals from their nervous systems. Wait, really? That's what Boeing is going with in order to save a little money? What the fuck? The company is trying to convince a judge to not allow any testimony that the victims might have experienced pain and suffering because the company argues it will unduly influence the jury to award higher damages. And Illinois law stipulates that settlements should only be based on the grief and loss experienced by family members and not the pain and suffering of the victim, unless it can be proven that the victim did in fact suffer. Boeing says it can't be proven because no one was on the plane. A witness for the company summed it up with this claim, quote, "While passengers undoubtedly perceive the flight as scary, humans have a tendency to hold on to hope and not expect the worst. Ultimately, it is impossible to know the subjective experience of each occupant." A former commercial pilot filed a rebuttal on behalf of the plaintiffs, stating the fucking obvious that the loss of control and nosedive, quote, "would have been not only distressing, but terror inducing to all passengers on board." And another witness for the plaintiffs said, "Before the crash, passengers on board would have experienced panic, nausea and vomiting, heart problems, or the feelings of their eyes popping out." Now, Boeing is a massive company with ties to the US defense industry and other military and aerospace clients around the world. It is in no risk of going out of business, even after the tens of billions it lost because of these two crashes. No matter what judgments are handed down in these remaining civil lawsuits against the company, Boeing will be just fine. Which is why it's so egregious that the company is choosing to insult victims' families by claiming that dying in a plane crash is actually a pretty good way to go out. No pain and suffering. They might as well have died sleeping in their own beds. All of this to save a couple $1 million on each lawsuit that, again, is insignificant to the company, but means quite a lot to each individual family that's been victimized. I've been doing this segment for years now, and this is a new level of depravity that even I'm not accustomed to yet. It sort of makes me want to puke. Boeing, this week's Rich Dicks. All right, gang, we're ending the show this morning with a sunrise from Pennsylvania. It was sent in by Nick in Westchester. Enjoy. Thanks, Nick. Show's over. Thanks for watching. Thanks to the team behind the scenes. Please subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels if you haven't already. One day capitalism's going to fall. Promise. But until then, we're going to be right here. See you next week.